Okay, we're back in Photoshop and we're still talking about importing and exporting images in Photoshop, aka getting things into and out of Photoshop. Previously, we've talked about how to use the File Open or just the Open menu in order to take an existing image and bring it into Photoshop, and also how to save it. But now we're going to talk about two very quick different ways you can also get images into Photoshop. And one of those is by dragging and dropping. So here I have a folder full of 3 different images. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take one of the images and I'm going to drag it into Photoshop. Now when I let go and just wait a moment, you can see that that image has now opened into Photoshop. So everything looks normal. We've got our image here that we've opened into Photoshop. If I want to, I can hit File and save. Let's change it first before we do any of that. Let's this time let's put a little filter on it. I'm going to pull up the photo filter adjustment layer. We will select a blue filter to it and pull up the density just to give it a bit of a blue tone to the image. We can close this adjustment layer menu now. All right, so we've dragged and dropped an image into Photoshop, and we have applied a slight blue adjustment to it. And now we're going to hit File, and there's, once again, multiple ways we could get this out of Photoshop. I could hit Save As, and if I wanted to keep my layers, I could save it as Photoshop. If I was done with this image and just wanted to save it, I would select JPEG. Let's save this one as a Photoshop document because I feel like this is something I would maybe go back and edit a little bit more. So it's no longer black and white, so we'll just call this blue tint Rowan, and make sure that our format is Photoshop AKA .psd, which stands for Photoshop document. And then we can hit save. This would keep our layers, so we could go back and re-edit this later on. However, saving it as a PSD kind of inhibits you from sending it, displaying it online or sending it to somebody to view that does not have Photoshop. Another thing we could do is we could hit File, and then we could hit Export. Quick export is PNG. We haven't really talked about PNGs yet, but that would just export this image as a file type that's good for the internet. But we could also hit Export As, which would bring this dialog box up. And then instead of PNG, we would change this once again to JPEG. And then it gives us the little documents over here. It tells us the size, how many pixels are in the width, how many pixels are in the height, just general dimension-related things. And then we could hit Export. I'm not going to do that right now because we already have this saved, so I'm just going to hit Cancel. And we've already saved this one also, so I will just hit File and Close. Let's talk about one more way you can bring images into Photoshop. Let's see. Okay, and that is going to be by copy and pasting. So here I have an image. I'm going to open this image up into its new tab. What I did for this was I went ahead and I searched Google Images for the word photographer. And just like when we talked about getting images legally, I went ahead and I clicked on Tools. I changed the size to large, and I also changed the usage to labeled for reuse with modification. And then I also typed in one of my favorite websites to get public domain images, which is Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S, into the search bar. I got this picture open right here. Okay, I have this image open in Google. And what I'm going to do is let's zoom in, right-click or two-finger click, depending on what you're using, whether it's a Mac or PC, and I'm going to select Copy Image. So you can just copy anything from the internet, and then we're going to pull up Photoshop, and we're going to click on the Create New, which is the same as hitting File New, which brings up this dialog box. And if you have something copied, like I do in this case, the first thing that Photoshop will highlight in the new document dialog box is this one that says Clipboard, this little preset. And the clipboard setting is basically the exact same dimensions as the thing that you have currently copied. That's AKA sitting on your clipboard waiting to be pasted. So I'm going to click on the clipboard, and I'm going to click on Create, which will pull up this little blank canvas, and then I'm going to hit Edit, Paste. And that will paste the picture that I've previously copied right here into Photoshop. I could then modify this however I wanted to. We could make this black and white. We could add another photo filter to it. We could even pull up brightness contrast and maybe darken this a little bit and add a touch more contrast to the image. So we've made 3 quick adjustments after adding the picture into Photoshop. They're all added in there as layers, and you can start to see that as we edit this more and more, we get to start stacking more and more layers in our layers panel. And if I were happy with this picture, let's do one more thing. Let's go to our crop tool. We haven't really used that yet. I'm going to reset my crop tool to get rid of the previous parameters that I was using. And let's actually change this to square. This is our options bar over here, changing the specifics from the crop. Square is the aspect ratio, aka it's the shape that we're going to crop this image to. The ratio is 1:1, so 1 on the width, 1 on the height, which gives us a square shape. And we'll just move this around until we can see exactly what we want to see in this image. And when we get it there, we're going to try to get our eye right on that rule of thirds intersection. And we'll commit to the change by hitting the check mark over here or hitting the enter or return button on your keyboard. And that commits the crop. All right, if we're happy with this, we can hit File, Save As. And if we're done, we don't want to make any other changes, we would change the format once again to a JPEG. And we'll just call this one Girl with Camera. Save it into our folder, make sure we're saying JPEG, hit save, and make sure our quality is 12. We could hit preview just to see how big the file size is, and this is a pretty small file size. So we'll hit OK, and then hit this little X and say don't save, and we're done. So what we did in this video was we talked about a couple of more ways to import and export documents with Adobe Photoshop, aka getting things into and then getting things out of Photoshop. For this video, we dragged and dropped, and we also copy-pasted existing images into Photoshop. And we use the file export and file save as commands in order to get them out of Photoshop. That's it for now.